Deb, do you want to take it?
Okay, 9:30. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Deb Weitzel from the City of Middleton Sustainability Committee. Middleton was one of the first communities in Wisconsin to set clean energy goals. We're on target to obtain 100% of the city's operations for electricity needs by 2035. We also award citizens, businesses, and nonprofits for their sustainability endeavors through the Sustainable Middleton Awards. Our next sustainable youth speaker is Kathleen Slattery Moshkow. Her talk, scheduled for October 24th at 6 p.m., is entitled Sustainable Development. Our last talk is December 5th at 6 p.m., and we have a speaker from Renew who will be speaking about choosing an electric vehicle. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Kathy Kuntz, on the benefits to businesses in the Inflation Reduction Act. Kathy is the director of the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change, where she leads climate action efforts across Dane County. Kathy has 30 years of experience implementing programs focused on resource efficiency and climate action. Prior to joining Dane County, Kathy led Cool Choices, a nonprofit that worked with businesses and local governments on sustainable practices. And prior to that, Kathy led Focus on Energy, Wisconsin's statewide energy efficiency and renewable energy program. Thanks so much, and I'm turning it over to Kathy Kuntz.
Thanks so much, Deb. So to clarify for the audience, we're gonna record the part where I'm talking here, and then we will do questions at the end, and that part will not be in the recording, just as an FYI. So I am delighted that you're all here today to talk about the incentives for businesses, and this will include incentives for nonprofits. Again, I'm with the Office of Energy and Climate Change. We are part of the county executive's office, been around since 2017, and really we think about two things. We're monitoring the county's internal operations, how we reduce our emissions. You might have heard that last year we became 100% renewable offset in our electric usage at the county. And then most of our work is on county-wide emissions. So consistent with our climate action plan, we want to cut emissions in half by 2030 and be carbon neutral by 2050. And there's more information online about how that all works. This slide deck will be available to you as a PDF afterwards. The point I want to make, though, about our office and county government, maybe more broadly, is that in Wisconsin, counties do not have a lot of authority. We set goals about cutting emissions, but we can't actually force individuals or businesses to change their practices. That's not how the law works in Wisconsin. So we have set these goals, but we have to use other strategies to achieve these goals. And so the first of those biggest strategies is to lead by example. So we try to do things in our internal practices that provide an example to others. And maybe one of my favorite examples of this is we did a renewable energy project with Alliant Energy that helped us become 100% renewable offset. And now the village of McFarland is copying that project and doing a similar project with Alliant that will help them in their school district move closer to 100% renewable offset. So that is the sort of thing we like to see, that leading by example. But we're not the only ones who are doing cool things. And so another way we try to influence change is to celebrate all the cool stuff other folks are doing. So at this point, this slide we need to update. We just announced our 2024 climate champions. So now we have 180 local climate champions. I have no idea how we're going to get 30 more logos on this slide, but the point being, there's like really cool stuff going on across our communities. Local governments, schools, private businesses, nonprofits are all doing things that are part of the climate solution. And when we celebrate those activities, that creates a ripple effect and can accelerate what's going on out there. So that's a big piece of what we do. everything we're doing, we're trying to embed equity in the conversation, because the reality is that whether you're talking locally or globally, the groups of people who had the least to do with the climate crisis we're in today are often seeing the largest repercussions from the climate crisis. So we want to create a clean energy future in Dane County where everybody sees the benefits of that transition, where everybody has lower bills, everybody has cleaner air, everybody has access to the clean energy careers that are created. So equity is a big piece of this. Ultimately, though, to make it easy for folks to do the right thing, we need to support, like, simplifying that. If there's a million choices in front of you, that's kind of overwhelming. And one of the ways that we've really committed to making things easier is helping folks make sense of the new federal funding. So we've devoted a section of our website to the federal funding, and our aim is to, we read the 200 plus page IRS guidance documents and then try to provide 4 or 5 bullets of this is what's really important to know about this opportunity, with a link to the long document in case you are having some insomnia, but trying to give people that basic information so that they're able to move forward easily with this. And we're leaning into this federal funding because the federal funding is huge. Like, there's no other way for me to describe this. So I was at Focus on Energy in 2009 when the Recovery Act happened, and we were talking about $30 billion for clean energy in the United States. And we thought that was so amazing and so big, and it was big comparative to what had happened before. But now we're talking about upwards of $130 billion. So the amount of opportunity here is just enormous. And a significant piece of that enormous opportunity is tax credits. And I'm going to talk a lot about tax credits today because tax credits are not competitive. If you do a project that qualifies, you get the credit. It's a very simple thing, but it only happens if you do the project. So it is a big opportunity, but it's only an opportunity if we take it. So we'll talk a lot about that. So I'm going to dig into what these various opportunities are. And then I should have said up front, feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll get to those at the end. So the first incentive I want to talk about is for energy efficiency. And this is the only one we'll talk about that's actually a tax deduction, not a tax credit. So for businesses, it is a tax deduction that you can get for making your facility more energy efficient. And the difference is a tax deduction comes off the profits a business makes, and then your tax rate is applied to that remaining profit, whereas a tax credit comes off the amount of money you actually owe. So in some ways, tax credits are better, but for efficiency, we have a tax deduction. And the tax deduction is based on how much total energy you save compared to what your building used previously. So in the kind of and this deduction probably works best for businesses with large facilities. So if I had an older building that's, let's say it's 100,000 square feet and it is inefficient, I would leap into this opportunity because if I can identify measures, lighting, heating and cooling systems, all kinds of things might be in this, that can cut the energy use by 50%, I can get $5 per square foot of a tax deduction if I meet the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirement. So if I meet those, I can get in my 100,000 square foot building a $500,000 tax deduction, which is a pretty significant tax deduction for a business. You can also, so You can also layer focus on energy and PACE financing with this. We'll talk about that in a second. This, because it's a deduction, is not as useful for tax exempt entities, for nonprofits and things. They can transfer it to their design team, but like that's quite a bit more complicated. Again, this tax deduction really works best for large facilities. It is available for new construction. You can compare it to an ASHRAE code to see how it works on new construction, but particularly for older buildings, because the baseline is your past energy usage. I think it's an opportunity there. So in the course of that, I said you can layer things with focus on energy and PACE. And this is really significant, a big difference from the federal funding under the Recovery Act to the federal funding available now is that now the feds are really encouraging a layer cake. They're encouraging you to use focus on energy incentives and get federal tax credits. You're never going to get more money than you put into a project, but you can get pretty darn close sometimes. So we tend to think about focus on energy providing incentives, rebates for the lighting we install or the new heat pump system. But focus on energy, I want to emphasize, also has technical support. And particularly for businesses, there are opportunities to get technical support that can help you figure out what to do. So that's an important piece of this. And then PACE financing. PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. So in Dane County, you can opt to finance energy efficiency improvements or renewable energy improvements in a way that is cash flow positive. So maybe your project is going to save $1,200 a year on your energy bill. Well, your loan repayments might be $1,000 a year. So you've got $200 more in your pocket doing the project than you did not doing the project. A really significant opportunity. And again, you can finance things and get the credits. So the layering is a really important piece of this. So that was the energy efficiency part. The renewable energy part, we're going to end up spending more time on. And the reality is the Inflation Reduction Act, and apparently Congress loves renewable energy. The renewable energy credits here are amazing. Okay, there are 30% credits for solar, wind, battery storage, and geothermal. And that's 30% of your total project cost. No limits on the project cost. These credits, by the way, are in place through 2032. The tax deductions on efficiency are actually permanent. That's a permanent place in the tax law. That one doesn't expire. These expire in 2032. And I say, Congress loved renewable energy because they really thought about how to make it accessible for everyone. So businesses and farms can do a project and claim this 30% credit, but maybe you're a small farm and you don't have a tax bill at the end of the year that you need to pay. You're kind of breaking even there on that. Well, you can actually sell your credit to someone else under the IRS system. And everything we're hearing about, they call it transferability, is people are getting about 95 cents on the dollar selling these renewable energy credits to like large financial institutions always have taxes to pay and they will buy these credits, sort of thing. If you are a tax exempt entity, a nonprofit, or a local government or a school, historically you couldn't get credits because you didn't pay federal taxes. Well, Congress invented this thing that they call elective or direct pay. They sort of use those two terms interchangeably. And under this, so as Dane County, we can claim a credit and get that 30%, even though we don't normally pay taxes. And then homes and apartments as well. And again, you can layer this with focus and PACE. And, Congress's goal here was to make clean energy cheaper than the dirty alternatives. And I think we're really on track for that. So I want to give you a little bit of a sense of that. So this is data from the National Renewable Energy Lab, and it's looking at the price of residential solar and commercial solar rooftop systems between 2010 and 2020. And you see this very clear trajectory down. The maybe important data point here to look at is this gray part of the bar. So this is the cost of the solar panels. So back in 2010, if you were installing as a homeowner, you're paying about $250 a watt, and for commercial, it was about the same at that point. Well, by 2010, the panel itself cost 50 cents a watt. That's about the panels being more efficient and the costs coming down. I mean, the affordability is really here. And now if you imagine in 2025, 2024, 30% of this cost for businesses can be the tax credit, this becomes really, really cost effective. We think geothermal heat pumps are going to be really cost effective here too, and partly because the 30% credit for the geothermal system applies to the wells in the ground. So geothermal heat pumps put wells in the ground and leverage that consistent temperature underground to heat and cool buildings. So it applies to the wells in the ground, but it also applies to all of the controls and pipes and ducts inside the building. So you're essentially getting 30% off the whole heating and cooling system for a new building when you choose to go with geothermal. And what engineers are telling us is those costs are penciling out in pretty interesting ways, that geothermal, which costs much less to operate the building, is coming out pretty close on first construction costs because of the credit. The photo here, just to explain that, this is at Forest Edge Elementary, the net zero energy school in Oregon, and they have this cool graphic showing the kids how deep the geothermal wells go compared to, that's a inverted state capitol there, showing them just how deep the wells are compared to a building they know, to give you that sense of how geothermal works. So I'm going to give you a case study here, and it's a public case study because it's easier for us to access data from public entities. So the Village of McFarland built the Public Safety Center. It was finished after the Inflation Reduction Act passed, so it qualified for these credits. It has geothermal and solar. The total cost for those systems was just under $3.4 million. And so the credit, they're going to get about $1 million back from the federal government as a credit on this project. And literally, that's $1 million coming back to the village that, they had to fill out some IRS forms to get that, but this was not a grant that they had to spend weeks writing. I mean, my estimate is that staff there spent about 20 hours doing the paperwork to get $1 million. And when that $1 million comes, the Village of McFarland will decide what they do with that $1 million. It's not, required that they do a particular thing with it. And one other example for you from the nonprofit world. So Centro Hispano built a new facility in this last couple of years on the south side of Madison. And, they're a nonprofit, so they were looking for all the resources they could find to help pay for the solar and geothermal they did on their facility. So Solar for Good is a program that provides grants and panels to nonprofits. They applied for that and got a $10,000 grant. The City of Madison's Madison program has grants available just to entities inside Madison. Other parts of the program are available to folks in Middleton, but not that part. So they got a grant there. They got incentives from Focus on Energy, energy efficiency, and solar. And then there was the Inflation Reduction Act. So they got $63,000 was their share of the solar base credit. They also got a bonus credit for serving low-income communities. We'll talk about bonuses in a minute. And they got $500,000 for their geothermal. So in total, their system cost, the geothermal and solar cost just under $2 million. And they got essentially a third of the money for that from these various sources. And clearly the biggest, I mean, what, close to 90% of that comes from the Inflation Reduction Act. But that, and I should like credit to Bennett Findorf for me stealing his slide here, because this is just, I think, a good illustration of what a game changer the IRA is in terms of funding for these projects. I mentioned their bonus credits. So there are 3 sets of bonus credits. So there's the 30% sort of starting credit for a project, for a solar project, but there are ways you can get bonuses. So one set of bonus credits is competitive. This is the only piece that's competitive in the whole of the credits. Once a year, the IRS opens this window for solar and wind projects that either are located in low-income communities or serve low-income communities. And there's, various subcategories, and a project can qualify for 10 to 20% additional credit for their project. So Centro qualified for and won a 10% additional credit. So they essentially got 40% of the cost of their solar covered. So that's one bonus. Then there's a bonus for energy communities. Here the federal government is trying to encourage projects that occur where fossil fuel production or consumption occurred historically. So here in Dane County, the MG&E at the Blount Street plant downtown used to burn coal, and that qualifies as an energy community. So there's a area of census tracts around Blount Street, essentially, where you can get this energy community bonus because if your project is located in that area. Finally, there's a domestic content bonus. So if you meet very specific Buy American requirements, you can get 10% for that. So in some cases, we're seeing nationally, there are entities that are doing projects where they're getting up to 70% of the project costs covered by these credits because they're serving a low-income community in an energy community. They've sort of managed to make all of these things work at once. So a lot there. Beyond your buildings, there are credits for your fleet. So as a business, you can qualify up to $7,500 for electric vehicles you add to your fleet. And 2 important things to know as a business. The first is that, yes, this is like light duty vehicles, but for businesses and nonprofits, this also covers forklifts, commercial lawnmowers, that sort of whole cohort of non-road fuel consuming vehicles. The IRS has some they have language for that. There is also a bigger incentive for heavy duty vehicles when entities are looking at buses or things. This is a good example of the stacking. So if a school district can apply through the EPA for a grant to pay part of the cost of a school bus, they can still qualify for this tax credit for another portion of that bus cost. So, those things layer really nicely. Again, these credits are in place through 2032. And the important thing to know about the business credits, these are also available to nonprofits and other tax exempt entities like local governments through elective pay. If you follow electric vehicles on the kind of consumer side, you know that only certain vehicles qualify for the consumer tax credit for individuals. But for businesses, all of the electric vehicles qualify because there are 2 different sections of the tax code that cover these things, and essentially they didn't adjust them both in a uniform way. So partly what that means is that some of the EVs that don't qualify for consumer credits can be a really good deal for your business or nonprofit because they aren't the ones that are kind of flying off the lots because people are excited about the tax credits on the individual side. And then, like, we're mostly talking about businesses and nonprofits, but everyone is a person. So I like to always say there's also all of these personal tax credits. So on the individual side, again, solar, battery storage, geothermal, 30%. On the individual side, the way Congress has made the renewables even better is not only is there no limit on that credit, but if you can't claim it all this year, you can just roll it forward next year. So suppose you installed solar at your house and you have a $7,000 tax credit, but your income is such that your tax bill is only $4,000. Well, then you can take that other $3,000 off your tax bill next year, kind of thing. So again, on the individual side, the energy efficiency measures are tax credits, but there's an annual maximum. And there are maximums for each measure. So if you replace your furnace, there's a certain maximum for that. So lots of detail. Again, this is all on our website, and we have links to the IRS pages. The annual maximum for individuals really encourages people to think about a multi-year plan. What am I doing this year? What could I do next year? And then there are the tax credits on new and used vehicles. And the exciting thing there for individuals is you can get those instant at the dealership now. So if you go into a dealership and look at, say, a Chevy Bolt that qualifies for the tax credit, they can take that $7,500 credit right off the purchase price. You pay lower sales tax. You don't have to wait to get your tax credit back. There are restrictions on which models qualify for the personal credits, but it's kind of cool that you can get, and that's both the new and the used discount can come off at the dealership. Tax credits work really well for those of us who have a tax bill at the end of the year and can pay for things up front and wait for that incentive to come back with our taxes. For some folks, though, this isn't a very good solution. So the other piece of the IRA is a set of programs that Focus on Energy is implementing that are really targeted at low and moderate income households to help them do energy efficiency and electrification. And I mention this because this is a huge opportunity if you are a business or nonprofit to be sharing out these opportunities with your employee base or your constituents. That these are just really great. These opportunities go up to 150% of area median income. This is good middle class opportunities to pursue energy efficiency and electrification. And again, these layer with the focus incentives. So one of the things we're thinking about is how we can help businesses promote these things out to their employee base. And I'd love to hear any feedback folks have on what we could do there. I want to just close by emphasizing that, we talk about these opportunities because we want to see our communities take advantage of them. We have a bunch of information online about this, but also we, particularly for businesses and nonprofits, have one-on-one support. So we added a person to our staff in the last year, Valora Gutierrez. She's on the phone here with us today. A huge piece of her job is working with businesses and nonprofits who are trying to figure out how they can take advantage of all of this. So, we want to just really emphasize that we're here and we're available and we want to help you do all of this. And with that, I'm going to do my closing slide there, but then I'm going to stop sharing so that we